Welcome back, everybody, to the New York Knicks, MyNBA franchise here on NBA 2K22. Season number 1 of the series is now in the books, and that means it is time for us to start the offseason. We will be recapping Season 1 as a whole, but most of today's episode, we will be previewing the upcoming NBA draft. We'll go over the draft lottery. We'll do a full deep dive of the entire class. It's going to be a fun one. So our Knicks barely missed out on the playoffs, losing in the second round of the play-in tournament to the Atlanta Hawks in double overtime. RJ Barrett with a 50-burger. This team showed a lot of resilience here in both play-in games. In the first one against Toronto, we were down by 12 going into the fourth quarter, came back and won with the game winner by Emmanuel Quickley. And then against the Hawks, we were down by 20 going into the fourth quarter. So we somehow made a comeback. We brought it to double overtime, but unfortunately we ran out of gas. We finished the regular season exactly 500, 41-41. So we didn't have a losing record, but we also didn't have a winning record. We were pretty mediocre, as the Knicks have been for a while, and as we are hoping to change starting in this offseason. As we look at the numbers, RJ Barrett was probably our best player. He averaged around 20 points per game on career-high efficiencies pretty much across the board, and obviously in the two playing games, he was fantastic. Julius Randle statistically took another step down. Not to say he was bad. He was more efficient than he was last year, but he has lowest points per game in a while. Rebounds were still solid. Assists still solid, but I'm not entirely sure what his future is with us. Jalen Brunson took a little while to get going in the new system, but he did play really well down the stretch. Mitchell Robinson did his thing. Normal season for him, super efficient. The shot blocks went up by a lot. That I like to see. Emmanuel Quickley really improved throughout the year. Started off slow the first month or two, but he really played better as the year went along. Obviously hit the big shot against Toronto and has proven to me as a guy who we should look to build around for the future. Just like Quickley, Cam Reddish started the season off really slowly, but he played fantastic the final few months of the year, averaging nearly a career high in points on some of the best efficiency of his career. And if you look at his numbers month by month, really was not good early, but since the All-Star break, he's averaged 15 a game on really good efficiency, over 40% from three. His three-point shooting has been a big question mark throughout his career, but he really shot the three ball well, really after the new year, but particularly after the All-Star break. He's on the last year of his deal and will be a restricted free agent in the offseason. Of course, we also had Isaiah Hartenstein and Quentin Grimes towards the back end of the bench. They did their thing. And then we added some new faces throughout the year. Wendell Moore, Zeke Naji, and Christian Brown were all acquired via trade during the season. We did have to part with some of our veteran players like Evan Fournier, Derrick Rose, and Obi Toppin. And don't forget about Carmelo Anthony as well. The final few games of the season, he did his thing as well. He doesn't plan on retiring in the offseason. I'm not entirely sure if we're going to bring him back or what the plan is, but it seems like he would like to stick around in the NBA for at least another season. All right, let's simulate through the entire postseason. Mostly chalk in the first round, minus the 5-seeded Nuggets and the 7th-seeded Lakers winning. As we go to the conference finals, again, all chalk, minus the Lakers, who beat Memphis in 5. The Lakers were in play-in team, and now they're going to the finals against the Cleveland Cavaliers with Donovan Mitchell and LeBron James winning conference finals MVPs. So LeBron carries the Lakers to the finals. This is why we were competing for a play-in spot, because it's possible to make a run like this. Now, obviously, the Lakers have LeBron James, so it's a little different. He'll be going up against his former team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who beat them by about 50 in Game 1. Cleveland is marching the door on them. The Lakers do win big in Game 4, but that's not going to stop Cleveland from taking it in 5 with a gentleman's sweep as Donovan Mitchell take home the finals MVP. So there you go. The Cleveland Cavaliers are the NBA champions. The Donovan Mitchell trade works out perfectly, and they've got this core, Mitchell, Garland, Allen, and Mobley locked up for a while. So this team is going to be good for years to come. Also, shout out to Kevin Love for getting another championship, I guess helping his Hall of Fame case, although I don't think he needs a case because he's probably already in regardless. As we look at the retirements, a lot of old faces: Udonis Haslem, Joe Johnson, Dwight Howard, Lemon Pepper Lou, Rudy Gay, Al Horford, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Rajon Rondo headline the list of players calling it a career. No Carmelo, nobody on the Knicks, no one too surprising, as the Nets have one of their coaches retire, and then Dwight Howard makes the Hall of Fame. Very well deserved, in my opinion. He was obviously great for upwards of a decade in Orlando, and even though he fell off after that, he was able to maintain a role in the league for another 10 years after that, getting his Magic jersey number 12 retired. We will be adding one new rule. If a player is fouled in transition with a clear path foul, they will receive 2 free throws and possession. I'm pretty sure the NBA is considering adding this in real life, and I think it's good. This way, you're not going to see players fouling guys on fast breaks, leading to, easy points. And again, I think that's something that's probably going to be implemented in the NBA pretty soon. So we currently have the odds for the 11th overall pick in the NBA draft. It always seems like the Knicks pick in this range. They never get any draft lottery luck. Maybe the Patrick Ewing bent envelope thing might have cursed them. Who knows? Maybe this is the year the Knicks move up. All right, let's get started. The Kings had the 14th overall pick. 13 will go to the Suns after a very disappointing season out in the desert. The 12th pick will go to the Toronto Raptors. All right, here we go. It's either us now or we move into the top 4, and it is the Knicks. So unfortunately, we will not move up in the draft lottery, picking 11th in the first round. The Detroit Pistons have picked 10. The Indiana Pacers have picked 9. All chalk so far, no surprises. The Oklahoma City Thunder will be picking 8th overall. Number 7 will be made by the Charlotte Hornets. We're over halfway through the lottery, and again, nothing has changed. Will this be the pick where we have some movement? And we do. The Wizards are at 6, and the Portland Trail Blazers jump into the top 4. The 5th pick will go to the Orlando Magic, so there you go. We are down to 4. Pick number 4 will go to the San Antonio Spurs. They really got shafted as they had the second best odds to begin with. The Blazers will pick 3, so it comes down to Houston and Utah for the number 1 pick. Pick 2 will go to the Utah Jazz, which means the Houston Rockets will be picking number 1 overall. They have won the Christopher Killebrew sweepstakes, assuming he is the player who goes number 1 overall. And again, we'll do our full deep dive on the draft class in just a moment. So the Rockets, Jazz, Blazers, and Spurs is your top 4. The Knicks stay at 11. We do own a lot of picks this year, including 28 from the Mavericks and then 4 second-rounders. We own 10% of this draft. 6 of the 60 picks are in our hands. So this means we'll either add 6 new rookies, we may trade up and be aggressive, or maybe we'll trade for a proven vet who is a really, really good player already. We have a lot of options. We will be making some changes to the staff, firing the team doctor. A little bit of a surprise because our medical staff was so good last year, but we will be bringing in a lot of new faces as we offer a new team doctor. We offer a strength trainer and a sports psychiatrist or a psychologist. I don't know exactly what that position would be. They would all accept. So that brings us to the pre-draft stuff. We've done some prospect profiles throughout the season. I'm going to refamiliarize you guys with some of the prospects we've already gone over and introduce you guys to some new players who we may have not talked about. So this draft board has been flipped on its head since the last time we talked about the draft. The only thing that has stayed the same is that Christopher Killebrew, the center out of Kansas, is the projected number 1 overall pick. That has been the case since the start of the year, and it has not wavered at all. With the Houston Rockets winning the draft lottery, you've got to assume he will be the pick. I think he'd be a great fit with Houston's young core. They've got a plethora of young guards with Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. They drafted Jabari Smith last year, so you got to assume Killebrew will slide right in. Alperen Şengün is a good player, but he's not stopping you from picking a generational center. Killebrew is 7'3" with an 8-foot wingspan. He's a gifted offensive player who can score off the dribble and on the catch, and obviously inside. He's an unbelievable defensive prospect as well. There's no reason for him not to go number 1. So the number 2 prospect is a little bit of a surprise. It's Buzz Wigginton III. For those who have been around the channel for a little while, you probably know his dad, Buzz Wigginton Jr. If you don't, Buzz was our number 1 pick last year in our NBA 2K22 MyNBA franchise with the Seattle Sonics. Buzz Wigginton Jr., coming out of Michigan, was a gifted point forward who could space the floor, make plays inside, and he was an awesome defensive player, winning, I think, 7 or 8 NBA MVPs and 17 championships. He's now the general manager of the New York Knicks. I imagine he would love the opportunity to draft his son, but with his son's stock rising super quickly, I don't think he's going to get the opportunity to pick his son. It's sort of funny because these two are complete polar opposites as draft prospects. Buzz Wigginton III did not win the genetic lottery. He's a smaller point guard. He's a gifted offensive player. And the reason why his stock went up is because of a great performance in March Madness, leading Duke to the NCAA championship with Buzz winning the NCAA tournament's MVP. And it's ironic because his dad, Buzz Wigginton Jr., his stock fell because of March Madness. Now, he still went number 1 to the Sonics, and obviously it all worked out, but it's funny that Buzz the Third, his stock is going up because of his dad's kryptonite. Next up, we talk about Wally Knotts III out of Tennessee. When we talked about him earlier in the season, Knotts was projected in this range as a top 3 to 5 pick, and I said I expect him to come back down to earth a little bit and for his stock to go down just a small bit, and that did not happen. Wally Knotts III continued an unbelievable season. This is a kid who can do just about everything. He can space the floor. He can shoot the rock. He can drive to the bucket. He can defend on the perimeter and down low, and he's a pretty good playmaker as well. There's really no weaknesses with his game, and he has earned an opportunity to be a top 3 selection. He's the type of forward I like to build my teams around, but unfortunately we're not going to get the chance to pick him most likely. Behind him, we take a look at Roman Bulkman out of Wisconsin. He's a 6'11" big man, very smart player. Look at him on that play. Draws the double team, recognizes the open passing lane for the 3, but he's also a gifted scorer as well as he throws it down there. Very good defensive player as well. He's improving as a jump shooter, and he has good form, which suggests he should improve. And I do like his ability as a stretch 4 as well as down low as a 5. So I think he's another guy who's earned being a top 5 pick. Zymer Donaldson out of Auburn is one of the safer players in this class, but I still do really like his ceiling as well. I think Donaldson is the best day 1 offensive player. He's the best shooter in the draft class. In transition, he is a freight train. You do not want to get in front of him because it is not going to end well for you. Donaldson's a really good playmaker as well. Even though he's a score-first player, he knows how to get his teammates involved as well. He's not a great perimeter defender, but with his height at 6'9" and a super long wingspan, he's actually pretty good in the post, ironically. So he's more of a 2-guard on offense, but he's best as like a power forward on defense, and that positional flexibility is really interesting. I do think he'll improve as a perimeter defender, and once he figures that out, he's going to be a stud. Next up, we have Cesar DiCarlo, and you may notice at the top right, he tore his Achilles. For most of the season, he was looked at as the clear number 2 pick behind Christopher Killebrew. Now I can't say that's going to happen. DiCarlo is certainly the second best player in this draft in terms of talent, but this Achilles injury is really scaring a lot of teams. He tore it back in January, playing for his team Virtus Bologna in Italy. He's an athletic point guard who may lose a step or two if this injury proves to be an issue. I could still see him being a top 3 pick, but now his draft stock is all over the place, and if his medicals come back badly to teams, I could see his stock taking a nosedive. Some of his grades here are affected by the injury. He does not have a D+ inside scoring. He's actually a great inside scorer. Very good playmaker, very good defender. He's just not a great shooter. If he can improve his jump shot, he'll be a really, really good player, but the rest of this game is very sound if he can stay healthy. Next up, we look at Levi Bjerregaard, another European player. He hails from Germany and is currently playing for Alba Berlin. This is a kid who has great size and length, 6'10". He can defend the perimeter and down low. He's a pretty solid scorer, but the name of his game offensively is his playmaking ability. He's one of the best passers in this draft class, especially considering his size and ability. He does need to improve a little bit on the perimeter. He can get a little bit inconsistent there, but I think he's a lot better than that D- grade suggests. And I think he has a very high floor. He's going to be a super good player right away. Caden Frost out of Kentucky is a player we haven't really talked about yet this season. For most of the season, he wasn't really getting first-round buzz. However, he had a really good final stretch to the season and has warranted not just first-round hype, but top 10 hype. He's a little bit of a tweener because I don't think he has the quickness to be a true wing. He doesn't really have the size to be a big man either, although I would say he's more of a power forward in terms of his great interior defense. He does have a good three-point shot, so if nothing else, he could be a stretch 4 who spaces the floor at a high level. Next up, we have Jaden Lewis-Cameron, who I have described as the wild card at the draft. He's going at number 1 in some mock drafts, and others he might not even be a lottery pick. So the story with him is he was supposed to play for Overtime Elite this season. He ended up getting injured, and by the time he got healthy, he decided not to play for Overtime Elite, and then instead just trained on his own. So the last footage we have of him is last summer at the Crossover Pro-Am event in Seattle, Washington, against other NBA players where he looked quite good, but he hasn't played a competitive game of basketball in around a year. Now, he has an interesting skill set because he's a wing, but he can facilitate an offense like a guard. We haven't seen it in a year or so, and he's coming off a pretty serious injury, so again, he is a wild card. I'm curious to see where he ends up going. Ches Regenworth from Illinois is a very fascinating player because he's a super athletic wing. You had a great season this year for the Illini. He's a very good passer, very good defender. There's just no consistency with the outside shot, and he can shoot the three ball. There's reason to be excited about him as a jump shooter, but he just was not consistent at all this season with Illinois. Some games he looked like Steph Curry, other games he looked like Russell Westbrook shooting the ball. I mean, it was a total night and day difference. As we go down the board, now we're really starting to look at players who the Knicks could consider with their number 11 pick, starting with Woozy Bailey out of Duke. As I said, Duke won the national championship. They were led by Buzz Wigginton III, but they had a number of great role players who are going to be drafted, including Woozy Bailey, who's going to be a really solid 3-and-D wing at the next level. He's a 3-level scorer who can defend and play make. There aren't really many question marks with his game, so I think he's going to be a really, really good role player. Christian Harris, coming from Temple, is a fascinating prospect. He is very gifted on the offensive end of the floor, leading the American Athletic Conference in points per game this season as just a freshman. He's a gifted shooter. He can drive to the basket, put his head down, and score in contact. Needs to be a little bit more consistent as a mid-range shooter, and his defense just isn't really there. If he can improve as a defender, look out. He'll be really good. But if nothing else, the guy can put the ball in the bucket. Jamison Zander out of Duke is another one of their really talented role players. This is another guy who is a really good 3-and-D wing, although I think he has a little bit more upside than Woozy Bailey, the other Duke wing, who we just talked about a moment ago. Jamison Zander has really good size and length. Pair that up with a solid jump shot, an ability to do that, and decent passing as well. I'm really curious to see where he's going to go because I think he's a lot better than the 13th best player in the draft. And if he's on the board at 11, I think the New York Knicks are really, really going to consider that because he is the type of wing who they are trying to build around. Next up, let's look at North Carolina center Banyu Wibawa. He hails from Indonesia, moved to the States, and has turned into a great center for the Tar Heels. 6'10", around 290 pounds. Now, don't let the A-plus three-point shot manipulate you. He is not that good of a three-point shooter. These grades are, again, a little bit off. But I do think the rest of his grades are pretty accurate. He's a decent scorer from inside in the mid-range. Great post defender, great rebounder. He's tough, he's gritty. He's built like an offensive lineman who's 6'10", which is pretty scary to think about. And he does have a decent three-point jump shot, maybe not just A+. Alonzo Corbett out of Ohio State's a very fun player. This kid is a pure scorer, and he shoots with his left hand. This is someone who obviously has the blue hair, a lot of flair to his game, but he is a tough defensive player as well who shows a lot of energy and hustle on that end of the floor. And then look at this play in transition against Oregon. He has good dribble moves, crossover inside, makes the layup for an easy basket. I think Corbett's going to be a really solid combo guard at the next level. One of the best shooters in this draft class to go along with good playmaking and average defense, along with good athleticism. I think he's going to be a really good pro. The Red Rifle, Milton Surratt out of Gonzaga, is a fascinating player. Surratt is, again, one of the better shooters in this class, although he is quite big, coming in at around 6'9". With his thickness and size, I don't think he'll have the switchable ability to guard at the perimeter. I think he's more of an interior guy, so he could be a little bit of a tweener defensively because of his size, but with his jump shot, he's going to have a role in the league, even if he never becomes a good defensive player. Enzo Valentino, the Italian stallion, is up next. He's an explosive wing who can score inside and from the mid-range. He's a really solid defensive player as well, decent enough passer too. This is somebody who I think really fits the mold of a modern NBA wing and a modern role player with his defense, his passing. Not a good three-point shooter, but if he can improve there, he'll be really good. Bryson Potts out of Memphis has had a major breakout season this year as a sophomore, leading the Tigers to being one of the best teams in all of college basketball, at least in the regular season. Potts is a very talented guard. Interesting size. He comes in at around 6'8", so he's more of a wing, but he is a really good playmaker. He sees the floor super well, really good perimeter defender, just not a great shooter. He needs to improve there, but he can get to the cup and get buckets inside. Harrison Gretsch out of North Carolina is a really fun player. Hailing from Australia, he's a really tough-nosed player. Again, not the best shooter, but he does everything else right. Good defensive player, not just from the perimeter, but down low as well. He does have positional flexibility to switch on to bigs. Even though he's not the tallest, he plays bigger than his size suggests. Next up, we look at the two Jay Johnsons, Jaliyah Johnson and J.R. Johnson. Both of them are actually pretty similar players. We start with Jaliyah Johnson. He's a 6'7" forward from the University of North Carolina with good size and length. This is somebody who's a really solid defender. The best part of his game on offense is his playmaking. He's a really, really good passer. Not a phenomenal scorer. He only averaged 9.5 points per game this year with the Tar Heels. He's not a good shooter really whatsoever for the most part. Okay at driving to the basket, but again, it's everything else. He does all of the little things that may not show up in the box score that help your team win. And then we have J.R. Johnson out of Kentucky. He may not be the defender that Jaliyah Johnson is, but I do think he's a little bit better as a scorer, and because of that, some teams may prefer him. Really, really solid jump shooter from the outside, and although he has a pretty funky hairdo, he plays his game smart, and he plays his game the right way. I think his shooting numbers are better than the grade suggests here, along with his perimeter defense. I don't think these grades are doing him justice. I think he's a better player than those show. He has switchable ability inside defensively with good length in terms of his wingspan as well. And then we look towards the later portion of the first round. Remember, the Knicks do have a late first rounder from Dallas. We start with Trey Bell out of Ohio State, who looks like a top 10 pick at one point in the season. But Alonzo Corbett, the other Ohio State guard, really overshadowed him. That's not to say Trey Bell is a bad player, but he was a little bit disappointing after the first stretch of the season, with Corbett really taking a lot of his touches. Bell is one of the better perimeter shooters in this draft class. He seems to prefer being a ball-dominant player, so if he can learn to play off the ball, I think that'll really help him out because he is a good shooter off the catch. Good playmaker, good defender as well. It's just a matter of trying to figure out how to put him into your offensive system. Jackson Watkins out of Oregon is a pretty fun combo guard. Super explosive kid, really fun player to watch, and I think he could really be a good fit for the Knicks with their second first-round pick via the Dallas Mavericks. Look at him go here in transition, makes a nice cut to the corner, hits the three ball. He's a little bit inconsistent as a jump shooter. Again, I think his three-point grade is better than a D grade, but he is not a consistent three-point shooter. He is a great playmaker, along with being a great defensive player as well. So I definitely think he's going to be a good player at the next level. Patrick Feinstein out of Colorado is another player who I think would be a great fit for the Knicks with their second first-round pick. Coming from Colorado, he is the perfect 3-and-D wing. He's a 3-level scorer and can also defend down low. I know he has a D post-defense grade, but again, a lot of these grades are off. I think his post-defense is better than that. You look at someone who can defend anybody and can score from anywhere on the floor, he's going to have a ton of value going into the NBA. Next up, we take a look at Wisconsin forward Zaza Habebe, who, despite being projected towards the end of the first round, is one of the best defensive players in the class. He has started at the power forward spot for Wisconsin with Roman Bolkman, their top prospect, starting at center. Habebe does not have a ton of offensive value. He can score inside, mainly off of putback rebounds and as a lob threat, but he's not a shooter whatsoever, but it's his defense. Really good down low. He can switch on the perimeter with his quickness and length. As we now look towards the second round, Justice Baxter out of UCLA, the point guard, has no business going in the second round. For most of the year, he was projected as a first rounder, but his stock has kind of fallen a little bit. Remember the last time a UCLA guard stock fell in this channel for no reason? Yeah, that guy's name was Oscar J. Basilin. He ended up being pretty good. Now, Justice Baxter does not have the shooting ability or the athleticism as Oscar J. Basilin, so no, he will not be as good as Oscar. But he is also not the 31st best player in the class. I think there's a case for him to be a lottery talent with his playmaking, his defense, and his solid ability as a scorer. Ty Williams out of Michigan is a very gifted offensive player. Doesn't give you a lot of value on the defensive end of the floor, and a lot of the prospects we have talked about today are really good defenders. Defense is one of the most important qualities for me in a player, and Ty Williams is not an above-average defender, but he's so good offensively. He just has such a natural feel for the game on the offensive end of the floor, and that goes a long way. Charis Satrietru, a Greece forward, is the next player we're going to look at. He's a really talented scorer, particularly from the mid-range. He's not necessarily an explosive player, but he can handle the ball and make solid plays like this going up for the slam. I think he's going to be a good pro at the next level. Again, don't listen to the D- mid-range grade. I think the mid-range is actually the best part of the offensive game, and that 2K is completely wrong. Next up, we're going to look at Jason Clipso at point guard out of Auburn. In the last prospect profile we did, he was getting top 10 buzz, and now he's projected to go in the second round. What happened? Well, not much. He still is having a really good season for Auburn, but the problem that scouts see is he doesn't really have much ability off the ball. He's a very ball-dominant player that reminds scouts of another former Auburn point guard in Sharif Cooper, who averaged a lot of points and a lot of assists, but was drafted late because he had no off-ball ability. Clipso is much more efficient than Sharif Cooper, so I do think he's going to be a better player, but he needs to have an ability off the ball. He needs to be able to make plays off the catch, and he currently doesn't have that right now. Tennessee big man Vachon Kodali is one of the youngest players in the class at 19 years old. He's 7 foot, around 200 pounds. He plays big and he plays tough. I think his strength is the best aspect of his game. The problem is he's going to have to match up with NBA bigs. So I think he's going to need to bulk up before he's effective, particularly on the offensive end of the floor. But if nothing else, he is a good playmaker. His jump shot is improving. And for being only 19 years old, I think the upside is absolutely worth it with him in the early second round. As we continue to go down the board, Ahmed Kabongo is a really fun player in my opinion. He hails from the Congo, but has French citizenship, so he plays for the French national team. He stands at 6'10". He's a big, bulky player. In the last prospect profile we did, I compared him to Isaiah Stewart of the Detroit Pistons. Both players are very strong players. They have compactly built cores, but both of them are tweeners a little bit. Isaiah Stewart is a center because he doesn't really have the ability to run the 4, but he doesn't have the height you look for in being a center, and I had the same problems with Kabongo. He's 6'10". He is a great post defender. Wish he had a little bit more offensively, but if nothing else, I think he could be a good backup for a guy like, say, Mitchell Robinson. Remy Bouvier out of France is another interesting player. He's a very traditional big man. He is best inside offensively. He is a really good defender. He can switch onto the perimeter and down low. I don't think he's ever going to be a great scorer, and he really doesn't have much offensive value, but it's his defense and his length that teams are really excited about. So picking a guy like him in the second round with his defensive instincts is going to be worth it because I think he'll become a pretty good role player. Now we're going to look at a few players who once were first-round projections, and all three of these next guys have fallen down the boards. That starts with Azrael Atkinson out of USC, a talented, big, explosive point guard. He's tall, he's lengthy. He does need to improve his consistency as a ball handler and as a passer. The problem with his game is that he's very erratic. He has moments where he looks really good, other moments where he's not really good. Not a great outside shooter yet, also has to improve there, but the flashes are certainly there with him that warrant him getting picked. Splash Mayo out of Duke has a pretty unfortunate story. So back in February, he suffered a scary spinal injury that ended his season, and scouts are wondering how he'll be able to play in the NBA. All tests look clear that at some point during his rookie season, he'll be able to come back, but we don't know when that's going to be. He would have been probably a top 20 pick if not for the injury, so it's unfortunate that his stock has fallen all the way this far. His grades are not accurate because, again, he's injured, but just know he's a pretty good defender, solid playmaker, and a knockdown shooter. The Knicks have 4 second-round picks. Maybe they take a shot on a guy like him. And then Freddie Prince out of Kentucky, another talented player whose stock has taken a little bit of a nosedive. Freddie Prince Jr. started the season on fire for Kentucky, but once we got to SEC play and Kentucky faced off against better competition, he didn't look as good, but he is still a very talented player. Overall, a pretty good jump shooter. It's just that he was a little bit inconsistent as the season went along. Great playmaker. Not a horrible defender, but he is more of an offensive player. And now we're looking towards the real bottom of the draft class where we're looking for some gems. Marcel Micou out of France is definitely a player who I could see way outperforming his draft stock. He's a very good scorer from inside the arc. He's got great touch around the basket. Look at that fadeaway mid-ranger, for example. He's a good post defender, and again, he is a little bit of a tweener. 6'11", 220 pounds. Doesn't really have the size and length you look for in a center, but he is a good interior defender. Moving down even forward, got some guys I like down the board here. Seth Rogers, Cam Williams, Josh Sampson. But the player really to watch here is Jethro Quispe. He hails from Peru. He plays for the Brazilian national team. One of the better jump shooters in this draft class. Decent enough playmaker. Now, you're not going to get much value from him on defense. You're going to draft him as a guy who can space the floor and give your shooters some open room, and a guy who's going to knock down some shots as well. Dominic Cherry out of Kentucky has no business going undrafted, as he is currently projected to not get picked, which is mind-boggling to me because I think he is first-round talent. There are some character concerns with this young man, but he's a really, really talented player. Very good score from inside the arc. Solid playmaker. He can be a little bit inconsistent as a playmaker. Sometimes he's a little too ball dominant, but I do think he has some off-ball ability, and he is a pretty good defensive player as well. And then going down the board even farther, Hector Dortstrada is the gem of the undrafted group. Only one of the 3 mock draft services projects him to get picked. There's no reason for him not to be selected. He's a really talented wing who has good size and length. The word to describe his game is energy. Look at him on this defensive end of the floor. Multiple shot contests. He's a very smart player, recognizes the pick and roll on this play, contests the shot, grabs the rebound. He's an anchor on defense, and he's a solid offensive player as well with a pretty good three-point shot. The Mexican Mamba hopes to hopefully be drafted in the second round and become a pretty good 3-and-D wing in the NBA. So there's our draft class deep dive. Let's take a look at these mock drafts now, starting with Draft Express, who is Buzz Wigginton going number 1 over Christopher Killebrew, who is the second pick to the Jazz. They had the Knicks going with Jaden Lewis-Cameron. Pretty interesting selection there, I could see it. And Andrew Aker, an athletic point guard out of Georgetown, with our other pick. Here are our 4 second-round picks. They include Splash Mayo, the wing out of Duke, who had the spinal injury. Again, with 4 second-round picks, it could be worth a shot to pick a guy like him. 2K has Christopher Killebrew going number 1. Cesar DiCarlo does end up at number 2. And then at 11, they have us going with Buzz Wigginton III. So they have Buzz falling all the way to 11. No way Pops passes on his son, right? You would think. And then they have us getting, again, Splash Mayo with our late first-round pick at 28. As for the second round, it seems like they really have us prioritizing some guards. Jason Oliver-Thomas is a player I like. We didn't really get to talk about him, but he is an interesting wing out of Minnesota. And then NBA.com has the Rockets pulling a total wild card with Jaden Lewis-Cameron at number 1, Christopher Killebrew at 2. The only constant seems to be Zamir Donaldson at 3 to the Blazers. They had the Knicks going with Brendan Blaze, a point guard from Duke. I think he's a good player, first-round talent, but that does feel a little bit high. And then Xavier Kingsley, again, good player, but a little bit high. They have us going with a Chinese forward whose name has about 15,000 letters. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, along with 3 other additional players, of course. So we're going to finish off by looking at the combine and pre-draft workouts. That Andrew Aker kid, the Georgetown point guard, really tested well at the combine. Maybe we need to have our eye on him as he finished with the best sprint, lane, and vertical jump. Wally Knotts and Christian Harris had the highest bench press. That's a little bit surprising. Harris did well in the shooting drills, which isn't a surprise. Justice Baxter did as well, along with Patrick Feinstein, 2 players who I do like with our second first-round pick. And then looking at some of the other shooting drills, Marcel McHugh did really well. Buzz Wigginton III really stood out. I think part of the reason why his stock is so high is because he killed it at the draft combine, along with March Madness as well. Then here's a rundown at everybody. You can pause the video if there are specific players you're curious about. Some of the top prospects did not participate, although Christopher Killebrew did. Normally, you don't see number 1 picks participating in the combine, but Killebrew decided to. Credit to him. So we have 11 pre-draft invites, and I really want to focus on players who I think we have a realistic possibility of selecting, mainly with our first pick. So yes, I would like to trade up for a guy like Walter Knotts or Zamir Donaldson, but I don't know how realistic it is. So I do think there's a shot someone like Wigginton or Boakman could fall based on the mock drafts. And then I offered some other players as well, even down the board with Enzo Valentino, Jackson Watkins, Patrick Feinstein, and Justice Baxter. I really thought about doing Cesar DiCarlo and Splash Mayo, but I want to invite 11 players who are actually going to test, although it would be nice for our doctors to test those players. Levi Beauregard, one of our 11 invites, has a back issue, according to our team doctors, and they recommend we do not draft him, which is interesting. Looking at the results here, Jaden Lewis-Cameron performed very well, as did he in the draft combine. Roman Boakman was very good as well, the big man out of Wisconsin. Buzz Wigginton III, again, was great in the shooting drills, along with Justice Baxter, although Baxter did kind of struggle from 3. Buzz really stole the show from beyond the arc. Buzz Wigginton III wasn't even looked at as a first-round pick before the year, and now he might go number 1 overall. He has done everything right since the start of the season to up his draft stock. He's the type of guy you want on your team, and maybe he'll be a Knick, follow in his pop's footsteps. So that's going to wrap up the episode. Hope everybody enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Next episode, which I'm planning to upload on on Saturday will be the 2023 NBA Draft. I'm going to live premiere it. It's going to be super fun. Hope you guys are excited. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.